Hello, everybody. Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and we're here with Academy Award-winning actor and director George Clooney with his new film, The Midnight Sky, which he, of course, directed it and starred in it. And congratulations to him because this past week the film was named by National Board of Review as one of the 10 best films of 2020, which is pretty amazing. Welcome, George.
Thank
Yeah, welcome. I actually want to start with, I really want to get into the technical stuff and the directing but I want to start with the performance. It's one of my favorite jobs you've done as an actor. It's a very nuanced performance. It's something very different. It felt different. You know, can you tell us about, working on Agustin and being in his shoes?
Well, it's a funny thing as you get older, you and I just before we started, we were talking about my Aunt Rosemary as a singer, and I remember late in her career, um, she was touring sort of a jazz ensemble at the time, and I remember saying to her, "Why are you a better singer now? You can't hold the notes you used to, hold. You can't hit the notes you used to hit." And she goes, "Because I don't have to prove I can sing anymore." She goes, "I just serve the
Mm,
material." And I think that happens often with actors in a way is if you get the right material, your job is just to serve the material and you're not trying to knock anything out of the park. And you're not trying to impress anyone. Your job is to fill the shoes of what's needed and to do only what is needed and not to try to do more. And it's always a good lesson. You always have to constantly remind yourself uh, to stay, to stay on the message and not to get too, not to try to make things too interesting. If the script works and you're right for the part, then that should do the work for you. And that's sort of what I aimed for.
mhm. Augustine, I've seen it a few times now, and you slow down your movements. It's a very internal work. You've lost weight.
Mhm.
Was that a challenge to inhabit him? The fact that he's almost internalizing everything.
Yeah, not so much. I'll tell you what was the challenge. The hard part is, as you know, you've met hundreds and hundreds of directors. Directing is like being the general, of an army. You've got five, six different unions all there, wanting what they need, and all these different departments needing what they need. And you got to drive it and you got to make everybody feel heard and you have to listen to everybody. You have to work and you're constantly, it's all energy, and for me, I like to sort of lead by example. I pick up the camera boxes and march to the next set. And, I really believe in kind of, leading by example. And now I'm playing a part that's weak and dying. And I'd lost a lot of weight and I was weakened by it. So the hard part was shifting from directing to acting in, the matter of seconds. And that was trickier than it has been in other parts and other things I've done before. Because, you're going from a place of complete despair and weakness and stillness into high energy. Let's go, let's get going. That kind of thing. So, that part was tricky, obviously, but the other part, if you read the script and you see, there's a couple of cheats. There's a couple of things you get to cheat. When I was on ER, the big cheat for me was I could do anything I wanted, right? I was a womanizer, I was a drunk, but I loved kids and I took care of kids. And so at the end of a show, you'd see me go, "Don't touch that kid." And then everybody kind of went, "Oh, he's a good guy." So you could get away with a lot. And so once you put a kid in the picture that you're responsible for and you have to find a way, it frees you from having to create any charm or any of the other elements to say, no, he's really a good guy. If you're trying to root for this character, and usually leads, you have to find something to root for in a lead of a film. Not always, but most of the time. And so this is one where it didn't require much of that work because I was still able. I'm protecting a young girl.
You do have this really powerful last scene, where he's communicating with Felicity Jones, and you have that beautiful line about, I'm paraphrasing, but pointing in the right direction. Was that a difficult scene for you to dive
Well,
into?
I will tell you why it was difficult. Emotional scenes. It's funny. The older you get, the easier the emotional scenes are. When you're young, you're pulling nose hairs and things. But the older you get, a lot easier it is to get to those kind of scenes. However, the hard part for me was Felicity was yet to start on the movie. I
Oh,
shot all my
wow.
stuff first, so it's the first AD off camera reading the lines. So you're not getting as much help from the performance as you would like. I mean, if you listen to the dailies, you'd laugh because he's like, you did so much, and he's not an actor. So that you're really working on your own on that one. So that was the only part that was difficult about it. I once you've done your homework and know kind of where you're supposed to be and know that life is kind of draining out. The main thing was there were more lines in it, and so the main thing was about only saying what you absolutely had to. So pulling out anything, anything extracurricular, in terms of dialogue. Just that,
Hmm.
you got to at that point hope that, you know, if you've earned the trust of the people watching, at that point you can, the less said, the better.
So you have the book, Good Morning, Midnight, and written by Lily Brooks Dalton.
Yeah.
What was it about the novel when you read it that you saw it as a movie that
Yeah.
attracted you to it?
I didn't read the book. I was sent the script. Netflix had already
Oh,
developed.
wow.
Netflix had developed the script, so I was sent the script. And the first thing I thought was, this is a really interesting, really good script. It reminded me of On the Beach, but with a little bit of a release at the end, a little bit of help at the end, as opposed to completely dystopian. And so I loved the screenplay. Then I went and read the book, and there were differences, as there always are. And Mark's a really great screenwriter, really sharp, uh, astute screenwriter. So it was a process of going back in the book and seeing if there was anything that we could find that was left out. He's 70 in the book, and I didn't think I'm old, but I didn't think I could quite play 70. So it was more about how ill he is and those kind of things. Yeah.
And I read that the pregnancy that Felicity Jones was not meant to be pregnant
Oh
in the,
no,
the original script.
no, she wasn't meant to be pregnant when we started shooting. We shot all my stuff first. So we shot in Iceland, and then we shot all this sort of ice station zebra stuff, all of that beforehand. And we were in Iceland shooting, and I got a call from her, and she said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "No." And then she said, "I'm pregnant." And I was like, you go, of course, your first reaction is fantastic, but if she could see your face, you're like this, fantastic, because it's, you know, everything changes. And at first, our first reaction was, okay, let's find a way to shoot around it, which didn't work. You can't hide things. It's a
Correct.
funny thing about it's a funny thing just about acting in general. Whenever you're trying to hide things, the whole secret to acting is telling the truth, right? It really is just about telling people the honest truth. One of the greatest film actors of all time is Spencer Tracy. And
Hmm.
Spencer Tracy will go up and look at his mark. Watch watch the last scene in Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. And he's standing across the room with, Katharine Hepburn there and Sidney Poitier over there, and he's like, he does this great speech about, if it's half as much as I love Catherine, then that's everything. And you see him, and he looks at them, and he looks down at the ground, and he looks over at his mark, and he walks over to it, and he stands like this, and he looks at it like, and then he looks you up in the eyes, and not for a second do you think he's looking at his mark, because he's including it's all honesty and truth.
Hmm.
And truth is the secret, right? Every time he would look off the stage, he's supposed to be looking at the stars, but there's a grip over there and a gaffer over there, and that's who he's seeing. But he includes him. He looks right at him, and he looks over the other guy, and you see the stars. because that's his, because included everything as his truth. And so once we accepted the fact that she was pregnant, and instead of trying to hide it, which is lying to people, we said, okay, she's pregnant. Yes. And like in improv, what do we do? And so then it became, well, if we were on a spaceship and they were all friends, they'd be trying to name the baby, once they knew if it was a boy or a girl. And, just all of the kind of things that would come from that they would be more protective of her, and that she would still be a professional. She's not, we're not going to play. It's like the poor woman can't do anything. She's going to do the spacewalk still.
But I was stunned because it adds so much poignancy, the fact that she's pregnant and that she's having a baby, and then there's the through line between the irises, and
Yeah,
also at the fact that at the end, there's hopefulness that we know that a new life is beginning and a new family is beginning.
yeah.
So I mean, how did the original script? I mean, she was.
It ended before with just Felicity and David looking at each other and going, "It looks like it's just us," and they weren't in a relationship, so there was some funny poignancy about the idea that they're looking at each other, going, "Well, I guess we're going to be having sex now." I guess we're a couple now, um, and the responsibility that comes with that. But it made it so much heavier, and weighted it, and actually made it more hopeful to say, well, there is this continuity because there is already a child, and
Hmm.
we're gonna keep things alive. And so it was fun that way. It was fascinating and fun.
Hmm. There is, I love the look of the film, and there's a grittiness to the space, look. There is deep shadows. Can you talk about why did you have to make there that grit to the film?
Well, you have an advantage because you've actually seen it on a big screen. It really is very, very different on a big screen. It's too bad we shot it in 65, so it would be nice to have been able to see it. I saw it once on a big screen, but having done Gravity and Solaris to some extent, and having been and seen a lot of space movies in the last 10, 12, 15 years, what's happened from it is, and Gravity probably did it better than anybody. We've sort of seen space now in HD. We've seen it really sharp and really clear, and it's amazing when you see things explode in space and stuff like that. And I feel as if we'd seen that enough, and I wasn't going to do it any better than Alfonso Cuarón. So I wanted to take it back to um, less, more acoustic looking and less electric. I wanted it to look like Capricorn One in a way. I wanted to have grain to it and handheld outside, and the feeling that it isn't in HD, that our eyes are flawed and we see things differently. We did that in Catch 22 when I was directing those by diffusing the lenses, a lot of flares on the lenses, shaking of the camera, grain. And so same cinematographer, same effects guys, and we did all of those same things because we really wanted to make it a little more gritty than clean and precise. I've seen it done so well that way. I thought it's time to go back the other way.
Yeah, and there was also, I mean, I was noticing, correct me if I'm wrong, like the center, certain points of views of scene, the center is very focused, and then the sides are a little softer, a
We were
little.
using these untuned lenses, which is a pretty amazing thing. It makes it much more subjective in a way. We do it particularly with when we do the bleeding out scene with
Correct.
the Maya character. So if you and I were standing next to each other, side by side, and I put this lens on us, on wide angle version of that lens, so we could have the two of us in frame, I would be out of focus and you would be in focus. I mean, that's how little room for error you have in it. And it sort of just isolates people. You can't use it all the time, obviously. We were also constantly, which made it even trickier, much harder for the focus puller. We were moving the camera around in a circle because not around this way, but rotating the camera itself because one thing you learn once you get into zero gravity is there is no up or down, right? There is no north or south because it's constantly moving. So, like we end the blood scene upside down, pulling out, so you're constantly rotating the camera so that the perspective of the people that you're seeing, they're not held to any form of gravity that holds them to the ground. So there is no up or down.
Mm.
So and so if you start rotating the camera with a lens like that, it gets really hard to hold focus, So there were some real challenges with it, but that's what makes it fun.
Um, so the tell us about shooting the snow sequences in Iceland. What I really love about the the survival aspects, the snow sequences and the Iceland sequences is that we're I understand that we're navigating the internal landscape of Agustin, within this whole, broad landscape that we're seeing visually. So, I heard that you guys went to Iceland and you
Yeah.
actually shot in the below zero and,
Yeah.
what
70-mile-an-hour gusts, and yeah. Well, we were looking for bad weather. Obviously, we need bad weather. And we got up there and it was kind of pristine and beautiful and very clear, like it is in Santa Barbara today. And and you could see forever. But there would be these pockets. You could see these sort of little tornadoes. And so we had our, maybe 8 vans out with snow, snow tires and everything. And we just drive right towards it and jump out and start shooting so that we had that sort of snow. It looked like a snowstorm when in fact it was a windstorm blowing snow. Um, and we just chased those all day, and remember that our shooting days, because it's October and that high up, your shooting days maybe from 11 to 3, 2:30 or 3. You don't have a lot of sunlight. So you had to move really quickly. The problem was once you got in it, you could get lost really quickly. And so we were all tied to one another with strings, so that we couldn't get, so that when we'd had enough shooting, and you could only stay out for a couple of minutes in it before it just was devastating to you. And so the minute they would pull you in, they'd literally pull you by a string and find you because I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. So, we didn't know what was in focus and what wasn't. We didn't know what was in camera half the time and what wasn't.
and you have a 6-year-old girl,
Yeah. Yeah.
poor little thing.
Well, she's Irish, man. She's tough as nails. She showed up and but she had goggles and she had she was able to wear much heavier equipment and, with batteries, with heaters on it and stuff. So it was okay with her, except that she was just getting blown all over the place. But I'm tied to her, so she couldn't get away. We had to make sure of that because we're up on a mountain range, but to the right of us, 50 yards away, is a 1,000-foot cliff. So
Geez.
you don't want to get blown over there, and you don't want to walk blindly towards that because sometimes the snow itself is over the top. So like the cliff is here, but the snow is there. So you could walk over there and it would just break through. So, and we can't see it. So you have these experts there that are like, don't take any more steps that direction, who who knew the place. So, it was exciting. It made it an adventure. It's very hard when you're a director not to be able to control all the elements, right?
Hmm.
I mean, weather is a big one, and knowing that we need it to be a certain way and not knowing whether you can control it and relying on some luck is, frustrating when you're a director.
And having icicles hanging out of your beard
Well, I would
makes it.
do, once I was out for a while, you'd get that. But because it's just from your breath freezing, But interestingly, like, so we would shoot and I'd have all of that. And then, like, we would break for lunch, which would be 20 minutes. You're sitting inside the van eating. And now you come back out and this is all melted. So I would take a Evian spray bottle and I'd get on a snow, what you call it,
A
a
snowmobile?
snowmobile, and I'd be spraying it, driving at like 40 miles an hour, in 40 degree below zero weather, just spraying it so it would just freeze back onto my face again. So that kind of stuff was fun.
So, and then after you're done with Iceland, you go to the Shepperton
Yeah.
studios. Can you tell us about that shift? And also visually, Martin has a whole different
Yeah.
way of shooting in the space sequences.
Yeah, well, space is very different. I mean, I have to say, first of all, I think Martin is one of the great unsung cinematographers in the world. I started working with him on The American, and he uh, people aren't as aware of him as they should be. He really is one of the great talents. And the first thing we did was we had this huge wall of monitors, 1,000 monitors, uh, outside the space station that we already shot all of the footage of different perspectives of outside, so that they reflected and lit us, and we didn't have to use any sort of rear screen projection or any sort of. We had it all there for us, so it meant that once we started shooting, we could go pretty quickly. We didn't have to do any, and we did very little lighting once we were there. Martin had already pre-lit everything, so we could work really quickly. It was actually because it was Shepperton, and it's England in winter. It was actually plenty cold, so you could still see your breath and do all the things that were needed in some of the scenes. Uh,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
and then we flipped, and then after Christmas, that was up until the Christmas break. We shot all my stuff, and then after Christmas, we came back and we started the space stuff. And that was a whole other three other different stages, and Jim Bissell, who's this incredible
Yeah,
production designer,
he did E.T.
he did E.T. He was nominated for Good Night and Good Luck, which was the lowest budget film ever to have a production designer nominated for an Academy Award. Because we just shot that for $6 million, and he's a genius, and he spent a long time looking at sort of where we are now in terms of space, because a lot of this stuff we'd already be building it now in some way. So it was a lot about 3D printing and sort of the endo and exoskeleton and how it almost breathes with this kind of um, you know this cloth, this bendable, movable material in it. So
Yeah, there were. I like the design in the interior. Felt very calming, very
yeah.
soothing, and organic. The VR sequences. Okay, how did that come about? I mean, what I is so prescient. I mean, I mentioned I've seen the film several times, and now we're in Zoom. You and I are communicating through Zoom, and then those VR sequences where the you know the the space crew communicates with see their memories, right?
Well, yeah, what that wasn't in the script. I came up with that because I kept saying, and I was looking at some of the footage of the guys up in space, the real guys up in the space station, and they were really living for getting a video from home, and we sort of assumed that you couldn't really just broadcast something, a million miles away, back and forth. And so I thought, well, let's create kind of what FaceTime is in a way. But the way to do it is to create your favorite moments, just not the greatest moments of your life, just things that you love to do. I love to sit on the stoop with my sister. I love to eating breakfast with my family. Create that with their knowledge that he was supposed to be there. And then our assumption is, if you wore VR goggles, it would all be sort of 3D and it would be amazing. And our assumption would be that, 30 years from now, you don't need the goggles. We figured out a way to do it without the goggles. And so it was really fun to build this set that kind of comes alive and then have the actors be able to walk into it. And, it's sort of like a novel in a way. Books, the reason books are oftentimes hard to translate into film is because books describe what you're feeling, and films you have to tell people or show them. And
Hmm.
and this was a way to show people what's going on and what matters without having to explain much. You were able to just put, Kyle Chandler with this amazing sort of Jimmy Stewart everyman face and put him down at the table with his kids, just listening to them and eating cereal with them. and you know exactly why he wants to go home, and you know why at the end he says, "I'm going home," no matter what.
Hmm. Speaking of you said about, the novel and you're not able to tell things. Um, the music. This
Yeah.
movie, there is it's almost like a silent movie. There is a lot of passages that there's not a lot of dialogue, but I'm amazed at Alexander Desplat's work.
Yeah.
Is so intricate, and there are scenes in which you tell us how to feel, and it's very emotional. Can you tell us about working with him, and when did you understand that you needed to have
Cool.
almost this symphony playing
Well,
through the
we shot it with Alexander in mind. Alexander's a dear friend. I've done 5 or 6 films with him. I love him. He's a great guy. He's also happens to be one of the best in the business. I called him up and said, "We're shooting a movie, and I'm going to need more music than you've ever done for a film."
wow.
For that very reason, because there was so little dialogue that I said the music has to be a character in the film. It has to be an actor in the film. Like for instance, the blood sequence, which was something I came up with when I was watching the astronauts again, and they were drinking water and letting it float up in the air and then sort of slurping it out of the air. And the origin in the book and even in the script, the way she dies is she runs out of oxygen, which we'd done in Gravity already pretty well. So I knew I didn't want to do that, and I came up with the idea of her bleeding out and the blood sort of being mercurial and bouncing off the walls. So I called up Alexander, and remember, this is all visual effects, the last of the visual effects that got finished. So I called up Alexander, and he can see nothing. And I said, I need a ballet of blood. And he's like, a ballet of blood? And I was like, wait, a ballet of blood. And he wrote a ballet. I mean, he is, for that whole last sequence where I, talked to Felicity finally, and she tells, she says, I'm your daughter, and all of those things. That whole last sequence, it's about an 8-minute sequence. We were using Debussy, Clair de Lune as a temp
Oh wow.
track, and I cut to it. I cut the montage of everything going on, all the scenes. I cut to that, and by the way, you fall in love with a piece of music that's that good, right? And we used it all up until the day he made the score, and the whole time I was like, so do that, do what that other French composer did, and he's like, oh, Debussy, okay. And then eventually he came in and he played this piece of music, and I was like, it's just stunning, and it's beautiful, and it's emotional, and it's quiet, and it's confident. He's such a confident filmmaker. He's a filmmaker, as a composer. And it was so exciting to work with him and to have that score and to be able to put it in this film.
Um, Going back to the blood, sequence there, he added this heartbeat,
Yeah.
and oh, how complicated it was to shoot that sequence?
Not as complicated to shoot it, strangely. It seems complicated to shoot. It wasn't as much. Rotating the camera is tricky. The knowing where to put things when you can't see anything is always tricky, but you can do it. The hard part was the visual effects guys.
Putting it, okay.
You know, it was the last shot we got right, got finished, and it was 4 days before we handed the film in, and we were supposed to hand the film in. So because it's not something anybody had done before. That's not been done, and so it was about finding a way to do it. If you're going to do it, make sure it's the best. If it's never been done before, you better do it well. And the effects guys really, the first sort of views of it, everything was very round and sort of like balls, and we were like, no, it has to be pulling apart and changing shape and changing form and bouncing off of things and changing and coupling up with each other and stuff like that. So it was the process of getting the shot right took 9 months, but the shooting of it wasn't as complicated as you'd think.
Mhm. You know that one of my ultimate favorite movies is All That Jazz,
Yeah.
and and and
Me too.
I and I actually yeah, I just love that sequence
Well,
because
it's funny, I stole the sound design from my.
correct, yeah, from the pencil
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah. And the funny thing is, look, you steal from the best. When I did Confession of a Dangerous Mind, I stole about 15 shots from Mike Nichols' Carnal Knowledge, because everything was done in oneers in that film. I've stolen from the Coen brothers and Soderbergh and Alexander. You steal from the people you love. But that one, first of all, I mean, all that jazz um, uh, is just a masterful film, and the understanding of how he could make that sound, the sound itself, become internalized, was so extraordinary to do in a choreographer's film. It was amazing to me, absolutely amazing to me. And then to flip that and to be able to steal the concept of making it really subjective. Again, we're using those same lenses, and now we're using the sound to put it inside her head. And that was exciting to do. And we had an amazing sound design and sound team that really were excited by what we were doing and what we were playing with. It's the kind of thing that can, particularly if you're watching at home on your computer, will go by and you won't get it. But when you see it on a big screen, it's really something to see.
how difficult was it to edit the film with I mean, in particular, I was admiring the way you cross cut between, this finding the balance of when to cross cut between the space and the
Yeah, it's a little bit of trial and error, right? So every night when I finished shooting, I would spend an hour and a half or 2 hours cutting the day before his work, mostly because I knew I wasn't probably going to get much of a chance of coming back and shooting again. This is before the pandemic, but it was just we had a time that we were supposed to come out by Christmas. We're backed into that with a schedule in terms of visual effect shots, so we knew there wasn't going to be much chance of coming back. So I wanted to make sure we had everything. So I was cutting every night, um, and so when we wrapped, I had a first assembly of the film the day after, which is, really quick. Usually you get like 9 weeks to do that. And so I already knew that I was going to have to, through trial and error, figure out how long I can be with one group before I have to go to the other. You have to get to the others. You have to dip your toe in, but you don't want to jump back and forth so much that you don't feel for either set of. So I made it the front end tip heavily towards my storyline and the back end tip heavily towards theirs, and dip your toe back and forth along the way, so it doesn't come out of the blue.
and everybody who's watching, I mean, listening to this, have seen the movie, and so I trying not to spoil, but the convergence of the Iris,
Yeah,
story, and us finding out the tie, how it was, bringing that together, editing wise, was that a challenging thing?
sure.
It
It's a
came.
challenge. I always try to make films with the idea that grown-ups are watching it, right? And that they figure it out. So when you see a little girl who doesn't speak in a spaceship, you got to have some suspicion that she's in my imagination. I can't imagine most people who watch films regularly wouldn't already feel there's something going on. So what you really want to do is make sure you don't tip the idea that she's actually, Felicity, 30 years later. That's the only thing you want to sort of keep out of the game. So, in general, it's like why I didn't explain what happened to Earth. I think people's imaginations are more interesting than anything you could shoot. When I did Ides of March, we did a scene where I'm playing the guy running for president, and I'm going to fire Philip Seymour Hoffman. And we shot a scene where, I'm in the car, he comes outside, my window comes down, I go, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" He comes, he gets in the car. And then we're on the other side of the street on the camera, and we just keep pushing in with Alexander's music playing, drums beating. And we just keep pushing in for a minute, just on a car in a slow push with the music playing. And then the door opens and he gets out and I drive off. We never shot the interior of it. We never shot me firing him. I assumed that our audience is probably has a better imagination than I would about how that scene would go. We know what happened. And so I'm a big believer in allowing some space for an audience to make their own decisions. And sometimes they don't like it, but I like it. And I believe, it's, and so I felt that way about attacking this idea of the little girl, which is I'm going to accept that a fairly savvy amount of people are going to go, she's not real. She's not talking. She just shows up. She's sort of, there's a ghostly, otherworldly thing to her. um, I'm going to bet people figure that or are guessing ahead on that. And they may have all kinds of ideas of what that is. And maybe it's about him walking away from his daughter, but try not to tip the hand that she was also happened to be Sully, which is that was
Hmm.
the secret to it.
Yeah, I think that comes across. And also, I mean, I mentioned earlier that the we understand that the landscape is his internal journey.
Yeah.
And that's actually, quite beautiful. Tell us about um, Ethan Peck, who plays the younger version of
Great.
you, and you know, the choice of this hybrid version that you
Yeah.
do where you blend your tell us about that.
Well, I'd met with the Netflix gang. Irishman had just come out, and
Yeah.
and they talked about should we, de-age you. And look, I loved Irishman, and I was fascinated by the de-aging in the Irishman, but it took me out of the film, quite honestly. And that's not a knock on it; it's a really interesting thing to do. But we know those guys, we know how old they are, and so as good as it was, you're watching it going, now it made me watch it going, look at that shit, that's amazing. But it didn't further the story for me, in a really wonderful film. So I said, I think that'll just take us out of the film, and I don't think it's a good idea. So we got to go casting. So mostly, but people know what I look like when I was 33 years old. I happened to have been on the most popular TV show, one of them of all time. So I knew I couldn't just it couldn't just be any, but they had to have eyebrows. They had to be some similarities. But I'm the director. I'm 5'11". Ethan walks in, he's 6'3", and he's one of the most handsome guys ever. And I said, I like Ethan for this. And Grant's like, he's 6'3". You look, and I said, I don't give a shit. I'm picking. I get to pick the good looking guy. I want him. And then I talked to Ethan and said, look, in order for this to work, we're going to take your voice apart, literally take it apart and put it back together blended with my voice digitally. And it sounds like we're just sort of overlapping each other. It was insanely complicated. It was thousands of particles of sound broken apart so that we didn't have to have a chyron that said young Augustine. That there was the ability to sort of recognize my voice, which is somewhat recognizable, and still
Very
have it,
recommend.
but still using his performance. So we used his performance, and then I went in and looped his performance exactly how he acted, how he did it. I matched his performance just to have the enough of the voice that we were able to match it. But what a generous thing for an actor to say that he'd do, because it's odd to see your face open up and not hear the sounds that you make. So he's a really good guy and wonderful actor, and I expect him to be a big hit. He's got all the tools.
Yeah, no, he actually quite striking. And tell us about the choice about David Oyelowo, who he's Nigerian, and we actually listen, speak, as he would. Yeah, I mean, you could have made him, speak American or English instead. Tell us about that choice.
Well, when we hired David, who I'd met a few times and I just adore. And by the way, he's a great friend now that we know each other differently, and he's incredibly supportive uh, and somebody that I really there's just forgetting all of his talents as a person. He's just a spectacular human being. And he came over and he said, I've never seen a Nigerian astronaut before. And I was like, well, what does that entail? And he goes, well, I'm Nigerian and I sound like this. And I said, well, I like how you sound. And he goes, but I'd like to change the name to Ariwo. And he said, that's a very sort of standard Nigerian name. And he goes, it would mean a lot. It'd mean a lot to me. It'd mean a lot to sort of, you know, the millions and millions and millions of young kids, in African countries, and particularly in Nigeria, um, that this would, that would matter to them. And I said, well, great. Um, you know, the thing about making a film is when you're the director, you are it is a dictatorship, right? You say what you say goes. You make the decisions. You take all the heat when things don't work. You know, they question your intelligence and all those other things. But it is your responsibility to make those decisions. But part of that is also to be able to be open and inclusive enough to say, well, that's a good idea. That's better than what I was doing. So yes, have at it. Let's do it that way. And that happens a lot, in filmmaking because they're smart people you're working with. And if the craft service guy says, "Well, wouldn't it be funny if uh, this happened?" and you go, "Actually, it would be great," and open to the ability to do that, and for him to be able to change his name and change a few uh, pieces of the storyline that would open up the world a little differently seemed beautiful to me, and and then you have these other actors. You have Demian, who's just a joy to be
Yeah.
around, an incredibly gifted actor. And he was coming out of a really horrible moment in his actual personal life, and he had a very
Oh.
difficult time. And it felt healing for him to be on a set and working, and we all felt it. We felt like this is a place that he needs to be right now, around working on a project he loves, doing scenes that he doesn't always get to do, and working with people that are kind and supportive
Mm.
it was really needed, and we felt it. We felt that way with Felicity. We felt like we were protective of her. We felt that way with Demian as well.
Mhm. Um, and then, I mean, you've discussed this already, but I mean, I need to bring it up. But the fact that, we're in the middle of a pandemic and this film is so
Yeah,
prescient about communication and you know I mean I'm sure you never imagined that this film would be released and be so prescient,
oh,
but obviously those they're the themes that um the lack of communication between people and our need to take care of each other are were themes that must have really spoken to you.
well, they did. Look, I mean, we're all here right now. There's a bunch of people, watching, in Santa Barbara and all around, and we should all be in a room together and telling funny stories and laughing. And that shared collective, uh, it can't be replicated. It just can't. And I miss the opportunity to be there with you in person and to be around people. There's an energy that happens that, it just doesn't happen over a screen. Um, uh, the our need to be with the people we love and the people that we enjoy their company is so deeply rooted. And when we did the film at the time was about regret and seeking redemption, and it was about isolation. It was about all of those things. But almost all space movies are about isolation in one way or another. What happened along the way was we wrapped February 14th or so. Basically when everything got shut down. And so once we started post production and I'm editing from home and everything else, suddenly it became more and more clear that this wasn't a story. It was a story about regret, but it was also a story about our deep need to to be home and to be near each other and to be around the people we love and to touch them and to be in their presence, not just like this. I mean, this is great, and the fact that we can do this and we couldn't have 10 years ago or something is spectacular. But it's still a lot more fun when you and I are sitting on a, in a room full of people, and they get to jump up and say something funny, and you and I have to react to it, and and I'll say something stupid, and then you and I will you'll point at me and tell me how dumb I am. That we don't get to do all of that interplay and stuff, and we miss it, and we didn't know how much until it was taken away.
Hmm. Well, it definitely, every time I see it, it just resonates to what we're going through right now. It's a very powerful, very powerful. This is your most ambitious project.
Sure.
The fact that having to deal with special effects, CGI, etc. How do you feel afterwards? Now, after
Well, I
such a
got a
big account?
well, I had a big learning curve on Catch, because Catch 22 was a year and a half of my life. It was a lot of work, and I directed 2 episodes, but I was there on everything and all of them. Grant and I were literally eating and sleeping Catch 22 for a year and a half. So I got a real taste of, we had one airplane on that whole shoot. So to make this work was a lot of digital help. And so you got a real lesson in, it's basically a 6-hour movie, in how to make and what to do and what to leave out, and how to how to be judicious about your time. Having said that, then we jumped into this, and I knew it was going to be harder because I was acting in it as well. Um, but you know, it's all about challenges, right? I mean, I became a director, and I was writing before that and producing before that, because I knew I didn't just want to be an actor, and I didn't want to worry about, you know, what somebody else thought about how I aged on screen, and whether or not I'd be allowed to work in the industry that I love. So I did it somewhat out of necessity, and it's been an incredibly enjoyable thing. And for me, the fun part is to be able to try different genres and try stuff. I have a great advantage, and there are many people who are watching this who will understand when I say this. I don't take for granted the fact that someone has given me the keys to the toy chest and I get to play. And I'm also very aware that they take those things away at some point. They do. Every great director ever, every great actor ever, the toys get taken away. And so the idea is, while you have them, while you've been given these keys, you got to push it, man. You got to try stuff. You got to stick your neck out. You got to fail. You have to succeed. You have to chase it, because it's going to go away one way or the other. And if you're holding on to it and try to replicate your one success, or any of that kind of thing, then you haven't lived your life, and you haven't explored, and you haven't done any of the things. So yeah, it's ambitious. The next film I'm doing is really small. The Tender Bar is a small film,
Mhm.
but nothing small in the world of COVID, because everything gets, But it's just about moving, and finding things that excite you, and then doing your best and being responsible with other people's money so you don't screw people over, and trying to make things entertaining. It's fun.
Well, thank you so much, George. What a delight to talk to you. And hey, to sing with you, because before we went live, we were singing Rosemary Clooney. So,
Yeah, well,
uh,
she just turned in her grave because she heard both of us singing. That.
well, thank you, George. Congratulations
Thank you
on
so
all
much.
the success.
And
Yeah, and
let's plan on doing this sometime soon, with all of us together in a room where we can tell terrible stories and laugh a little bit.
I'll hold you to it.
That's a
Uh,
deal.
okay, great. Stay well. Thank you,
You too.
George.
Stay safe. Okay, bye.